chat. Please feel free to put in the chat your name and preferred pronouns, any affiliation you have with an organization, or if you're not here with an organization, let us know maybe where you live. And then one thing you're curious to learn about today. That's great. And we will be collecting questions during the presentations um, in a document for questions to be answered later in the hour. So as the presentation goes on, if you have or you think of questions, go ahead, put them in the chat, and then we'll get them moved over to our Q&A document so we can try to answer as many questions as possible. And for those of you who are new and are have just joined us, welcome. Please feel free to put in the chat your name and preferred pronouns, any affiliation you have with an organization, if you have one. If you don't have one, maybe tell us where you live. And then also one thing that you are curious to learn about today. And we'll get started in just another couple minutes. Again, I'm Rev Sophia DeWitt, Chief Program Officer here at EBHO, and really glad that you've joined us today to learn more about TOPA, as well as a little bit about COPA and experiences in both San Francisco and also in Berkeley, where we'll be focusing our conversation. Give it just another minute or so to try to get as many attendees into our space as we can as we get started. If you're just joining us, please put your name and pronouns, any affiliation, organizational affiliation you have or where you live, as well as a question or something that you're curious to learn about today into the chat by way of introducing yourself. Again, I'm Rev Sophia DeWitt, Chief Program Officer here at EBHO, and we'll be moderating this session. So glad everyone's been able to join. We may have some more folks trickling in, but I want to go ahead and get started with our lunch and learn time and our presentation. Because this hour is part of EBHO's 40th anniversary Lunch and Learn series, which we've been doing monthly. And this October Lunch and Learn is talking TOPA about a powerful affordable housing tool. Because it's part of our series, I want to also go ahead and share a little bit about EBHO for those of you who may be a little bit new to us and may not know quite as much about us and how we do the work that we do. So Briseida, go ahead if you can and advance the slide. Thank you. First, our mission. EBHO, East Bay Housing Organizations, mobilizes the power and wisdom of our members to produce, preserve, and protect affordable housing opportunities for low-income communities in the East Bay. So we are a membership organization, and our membership is diverse, from residents of affordable housing to nonprofit affordable housing developers and their staff, local architects, people of faith from diverse congregations and backgrounds, and individuals across both Alameda and Contra Costa County who are concerned with affordable housing. We use a very 3 Ps approach to our work. That's our next slide. And that the 3 Ps are production, how we work to build more affordable housing by advocating for more funding for affordable housing development, working on housing elements and policies like public land for public good. So we make sure that, public land that cities and counties and school districts might not be using can be used for affordable housing development. We work on affordable housing preserving housing affordability, and that's really where this session fits into our 3 Ps approach. So we advocate for Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act policies. We also work to protect SROs, regulate condo conversions, work with community land trust, and then we work on tenant protections, protecting tenants from displacement with renter protection policies such as just cause for eviction, anti-harassment ordinances, rent stabilization, and the like across the East Bay. Next slide. And a little bit about the values that guide our work. We believe that housing is a human right, and that housing justice intersects with racial, economic, disability, and social justice. We also believe that knowledge is a path to justice. Collective action builds power, and that more voices and more representation lead to better outcomes. Our strength really is in our membership, and we encourage individuals and organizations to join us and become EBHO members. We have a sliding scale for membership, everything from $5 a year up to several thousand for larger organizations. Whatever individuals and organizations feel like they can pay. We don't want the amount to be a barrier to anyone. We want folks to participate and help strengthen our movement through your involvement. Next slide. So it is our membership drive season. So I am just going to quickly make a plug for folks to join or renew your EBHO membership. You can do that by going to our website, ebho.org/membership. You can use the QR code there to take you to that place on our website. But the more members we have and the more engaged members we have, the stronger we can be in our advocacy work for housing justice in the East Bay. Next slide. And as I said, this is part of our 40th anniversary Lunch and Learn series. So every month during this 2024, our 40th anniversary, we're covering a different topic. Today is TOPA. In November, we're going to be focusing on homelessness and the solutions we know exist and how we can prevent homelessness. Another couple lunch and learn opportunities coming up as we close out the year. Next slide. Okay, so we want to jump into our TOPA topic. And as I mentioned, we're also going to be just briefly referencing COPA as well. So TOPA and COPA, what does that mean? They're both policies related to tenant and community ownership of affordable housing. TOPA stands for the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, and TOPA policies offer tenants a right of first offer or a right of first refusal if their landlord puts their home on the market. If the landlord says they want to sell the home where a tenant is living, tenants can, with a TOPA policy, they can make an offer to their landlord to purchase the building so that it doesn't, go into the speculative market, or when the landlord gets an offer from someone on the private market, the tenants can make an offer to try to match it and to try to keep the property something that they own. COPA policies, community opportunity to purchase policies, offer the same opportunities to qualified nonprofit organizations to acquire properties, affordable housing properties that might be on the market, and to keep them affordable. But there isn't the same opportunity for a tenant or a tenant organization to purchase a property. Goals of these policies are to keep homes affordable, so preserving affordable housing, and to prevent displacement of tenants, so tenant protections. And TOPA policies also often have a goal to build wealth for tenants or residents. The policy under consideration most recently in Berkeley, and that community members and organizations have been working on for more than 5 years, in some cases even closer to a decade, was a TOPA policy and was called a TOPA policy, but it also had a COPA component kind of as a backstop that would have allowed a qualified nonprofit organization like an affordable housing developer to step in and to try to acquire the property with a first offer, first refusal. If the tenants were unable to form a tenant association or were unwilling to do so, all in the goal of keeping those properties as affordable housing for residents. But as we will discuss a little bit more later, the City Council has now shifted to want to consider more of a strictly COPA policy. So given that, we wanted, as part of this hour, to just talk a little bit about COPA specifically, and the place in the Bay Area that has a COPA policy and that has the most experience with running a COPA policy is in San Francisco. So I want to hand it over now to Amanda from the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, who can spend just a little bit of time talking about COPA in San Francisco and how that policy has worked. And then we'll dive further into TOPA specifically in Berkeley and what lessons that has for us. Amanda, thank you for
Hey,
joining us.
thanks for having me. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see. Hopefully, folks are seeing my screen. Ah, great. So, good afternoon. My name is Amanda Fukutome-Lopez, and I am a preservation project manager at the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. I'm here and I'm excited to talk with you today about San Francisco's Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, or as we call it, COPA. So just for a little bit of context, COPA was enacted in 2019 when San Francisco's housing market, like other housing markets in the Bay Area, was under intense speculation. Speculators and cash buyers were coming into the market, purchasing rent controlled buildings and evicting tenants, many times long term through Ellis Act evictions, owner move ins, harassment, and buyouts. So commonly, investors would flip the units and convert them into TICs, short term rentals, or buy out tenants and replace them with tenants that could pay much higher rents. San Francisco and its affordable housing advocate community recognize that the sale of a rental property was an opportunity to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing and preserve units as deed restricted affordable housing. And so in 2019, COPA legislation was passed in San Francisco, giving qualified nonprofit organizations the first right of offer and the first right of refusal in an effort to create and preserve affordable housing. COPA applies to all multifamily buildings with 3 or more rental units and 2 vacant land that could be developed into 3 or more residential units. So, how does COPA work? Well, to make COPA work, we first need qualified nonprofits or QNPs that are interested in acquiring and managing properties. So in COPA, we have a list of QNPs that MoCD has certified as eligible to exercise a first right of offer or first right of refusal through COPA. MoCD has an application process for community-based organizations to become QNPs, provided they meet a certain set of criteria outlined in the COPA legislation. And then COPA requires sellers to comply with the following process. So first, a seller or broker will send a notification of sale via email to the list of QNPs. The notification includes limited information such as the number of rental units, the addresses of those units, as well as the rate of rent for those units. And upon receiving that email, the QNPs have 5 days to express interest in the property. If no QNP expresses interest within 5 days, the seller or broker can list their property on the market. If a QNP does express interest within 5 days, the seller is required to give an additional set of disclosures to the QNP. And once those disclosures are received, the QNP then has 25 days to make an offer. So if a QNP makes an offer within those 25 days, the seller can accept or reject the offer. If the offer is rejected, the QNP retains the first right of refusal. And once the seller gets an offer for the property, they must provide an opportunity for the QNP to match the offer and the terms. If the QNP matches the offer and the terms, the seller must then sell the property to the QNP. If the QNP does not or cannot match the offer and terms, the seller can move forward with the other buyer. And if the QNP does not make an offer in 25 days, they do not retain the first right of refusal. After the property has closed, all COPA eligible transactions are required to provide to MoCD an affidavit attesting that the sale complied with COPA. So, one thing that makes COPA effective is the potential benefit to sellers. While COPA is not a funding program, it does provide for a partial transfer tax incentive to sellers that sell to a nonprofit. The partial transfer tax exemption reduces the rate at which a property is taxed beyond $5 million, setting a maximum transfer tax rate at $3.75 per sorry, didn't put per 500 dollars on there, but it's $3.75 for each $500. While this is only beneficial for buildings that are sold that are over 5 million, the partial transfer tax savings can be significant. So for a $6 million building, a seller can expect to pay an estimated $135,000 for transfer tax. With a partial transfer tax exemption, that would be reduced to $45,000. And just looking at how that scales as buildings get larger, for a $20 million building, a seller can expect to pay an estimated $1.1 million for transfer tax. And with that partial transfer tax exemption, that would be reduced to $150,000. So this is a significant savings and is also a great bargaining tool for our QMPs in negotiations with sellers. So, to date, COPA has been used to acquire and preserve almost 330 residential units and 25 commercial units across 18 properties. You'll see from this chart that MoCD supports some COPA projects with direct MoCD financing, but for many of the sites that were acquired before the market began to slow down in late 2022, the properties were acquired with the San Francisco Housing Accelerator Fund, or HAF. As a nimble private lender, HAF has provided bridge loans to some of MoCD's COPA projects. Their support allowed those projects to be acquired more quickly than if they were financed directly by MoCD. The fastest MoCD can typically move to close a loan is about 3 to 4 months for projects that are under $10 million, while the HAF is usually able to move about 30 days quicker. In these cases, these projects were acquired and rehabilitated under the HAF, and MoCD provided the takeout and permanent financing after the properties were stabilized. And I wanted to note that the HAF deed restricts their properties as affordable housing, just as MoCD would. And over the past couple of years, MoCD has started to fund more direct acquisitions as the market has allowed for longer closing timelines, and MoCD's terms have generally been more favorable than HAF in the current interest rate environment. And I would also like to note that since the establishment of our SSP program, which I'll talk a little bit more about, in 2013, our small sites program has financed the acquisition and rehabilitation of 934 units across 67 projects. And these numbers only include MoCD closings and exclude projects that are currently with the HAF. So this also demonstrates that though many properties are noticed under COPA, COPA acquisitions are just a small portion of MoCD's portfolio and our SSP portfolio. So COPA is one tool in the preservation toolkit. Though it's often associated with our small sites preservation program, COPA is not a funding program. COPA is a notification to our QMPs and the conference of the right of first offer and the right of first refusal. There is no funding attached to COPA for acquisition or rehabilitation, and MoCD does not currently have a dedicated funding stream for COPA administration or compliance work. The Small Sites Program is the primary source of soft debt financing for our COPA projects, and the city's Preservation and Seismic Safety Loan Program, or PASS, is the primary source of hard debt financing for our COPA projects. Because of the high amount of rehabilitation that many COPA projects have and low tenant rents, many transactions would not meet the underwriting requirements of conventional lenders. So MoCD administers these small sites and preservation and seismic safety loan programs for direct financing or repayment of HAF bridge loans. And while a project may be identified through COPA, it is not guaranteed that the project will qualify for or receive small sites funding or past financing. However, to make COPA actionable and effective, funding is always the key. And when preservation budgets are funded, COPA is an effective tool to support the preservation of at-risk projects. And as I close out, here are a couple of examples of COPA acquisitions. On the left is 2901 16th Street, a 71 unit building that was directly acquired with funding by MoCD, and 1130 Filbert Street, a 4 unit building that was acquired with funding from the San Francisco Housing Accelerator Fund with then permanent financing provided by MoCD. And that is my presentation. Thank you for listening and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for that overview of San Francisco's COPA program. Yes, we just as Amanda closes up, just a reminder that we will have a Q&A portion a little bit later. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will be collecting them and then answering as many as we can later in the hour. So now I want to dive more completely into the Berkeley experience with the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, or TOPA policy. And I want to welcome Jasmine Sozi from the East Bay Community Law Center, who has been part of the TOPA working group, which was the collective of organizations that were working most directly and intensively on passing TOPA in Berkeley. EBHO has been an endorser of TOPA in Berkeley since 2020, so we've been happy to be part of the campaign, but not as much in the weeds as EBCLC and some other organizations. So really happy to have Jasmine here to talk in detail about the Berkeley experience. Welcome, Jasmine. Thank you
Hello.
for joining us.
Thank you, Sophia. Can everybody hear me okay? Beautiful. Hi, my name is Jasmine Sozi. I work with the East Bay Community Law Center as well as the Bay Area Community Land Trust, and I am a representative from the working group. Thank you, Brisaida, for putting up the slide deck. Yeah, I am a representative of the working group. That's really just going to give you some updates about where our campaign is. Yeah, Sophia mentioned some of the key players on the working group, and I want to also send gratitude from the working group to several, to EBHO, and then a ton of people in the room who I recognize over my involvement in the campaign, who've shown up and give public comment or come to community events that we've hosted, or just really shown support over the years. So we really want to say thank you. And before I start officially with the next slide, I just wanted to name kind of continuing at what Sophia mentioned about kind of some of the folks that make up the working group. I just wanted to name that, yes, it is mostly kind of community-based organizations, not necessarily all, or just different range of what that looks like. We also work directly with some tenant unions, and we'll talk a little bit about what the pros and cons and different strategies that the working group has kind of implemented and used and thought through in a second. But I just wanted to kind of give shout out to some of the folks that have really been pulling this policy along for the last couple years. So yeah, we'll jump into it. Thank you so much. Next slide. Yeah, so this is just kind of to let you guys know where we are now. Unfortunately, kind of as Sophia's already mentioned, we are kind of in a phase where we're pivoting from TOPA, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, to a COPA, Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. So on September 30th, the working group had, in collaboration with Councilmember Luna Parra, we had worked on a supplemental report that we were hoping to get passed and approved by the city council, but it did not. And instead, Councilmember Hahn worked on her own supplemental, which really, with no input from the working group, mirrored San Francisco's Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. And so her proposal and supplemental really propose for the city staff to research COPA programs and right of first refusal models in different jurisdictions that have been passed, and then also allocate $100,000 to hire a staff to really conduct this study. Next slide. And so our reaction to the city council results. So we were disappointed, to say the least. This was a long process over the years of really a lot of community engagement and so many different players within the working group, just that I've seen, just so many different people over the years, and just so many different points of community engagement, whether that be, at a McGee Baptist Church and really just like getting feedback from community, or talking to city council members, taking back feedback from council members, and just really working with the community in that way on a really deep level. And so it was really heartbreaking, to not only get our supplemental shut down, but kind of have a new one proposed without any insight from the community. And so also, in addition to that, we were upset that the city councilors were not familiar with the updated policy. It had changed over the years, but just, in our conversations, it became apparent that they weren't as familiar with the policy, which just presented some frustrations. Next slide. And so this is just kind of our continued reaction. Of course, even though we are disappointed, we're still really committed to advancing anti-displacement in Berkeley and community-controlled housing policies and land policies. And we look forward to supporting supporting the city of Berkeley as, they pursue these research opportunities for COPA, and then hopefully to support the eventual COPA policy passing. I think especially as a really community-informed TOPA working group, and one that, we're reflecting constantly on like our base building and our capacity to really engage with tenants on a grassroots level. I think one of the things that we're curious about is how the city will be engaging with folks on that level. Next slide. And so moving from reactions, these are just some of our reflections as a working group. So we really realized that there was a lot of opposition from organized property owners and realtors associations, particularly in 2021. And we believe that those ideologies really informed how our council members were viewing the policy and voting on the policy and engaging with us as a working group throughout this process. And so it really made it extremely difficult as a working group, especially over the years, and especially as we approach September 30th, to reach consensus. And so ultimately, even though there were more people in favor of the policy, and that was on the floor in the actual council chambers, and then it was more 50-50 online, overall, even though there were more yays, if you will, than nays, the council members still ultimately ignored the voices of, their constituents. And we believe that they were more they were just more convinced by these property owners and realtors, who, are spewing a ton of false information, including this policy promotes eminent domain, ton of just lies. And that was just a big thing that was coming up. So not big, I mean, that's just misinformation is something that's really consistent across the board in terms of the opposition. Next slide. Just to continue our reflections. We had realized too, looking at the election season, we didn't know what to make out of like moving entirely. Like we had our moving with the election, and for the September 30th date just being so close. And we had a good feeling that, and even separately from the election, like the politicians could, like, sometimes like politicians are very invested in wanting to appear certain ways just to, to secure their seat. And so we weren't necessarily sure um, how that was going to play out, but we ultimately also saw council members' unwillingness to really be firm on TOPA, especially considering that opposition from realtors and landlords. And so, yeah, that was just something that we saw as a result of that. And then something that we also are reflecting on as a working group is just this has been a really long process. I think it's been with so many mixed emotions. Like I've grown in a lot as an like just in partnership with these folks on this working group. But it's just seen so many twists and turns and uncertainty and moving with kind of like the will of the council. Um, and so we as a working group we've experienced and seen a lot of turnover and fatigue. Um, and as we're moving into this new phase, as whether that's well, it's seemingly as a community opportunity to purchase act, we really want to reflect on, our base building strategies and our potential. And just like, what have we been doing? What can we do differently, especially as we move from a version of the policy that is as particular emphasizing tenants in the same way as the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. Just want to make sure that we're, have our base together in that way. Next slide. And so, yeah, I just want to talk to you guys about where we see ourselves moving forward. So maybe it's not obvious, but we are going to support the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act because ultimately, even though the version of the policy that we were supporting originally is no longer on the table, we're still fighting for tenant protections and community control of land in some capacity and housing as a human right, which, you know, yeah, we ultimately think we can still achieve in a Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. I think I've mentioned this a few times in the presentation, but this is also going to be a moment of pause and reflection and base building for us, because as mentioned in the presentation, that was just something that as the campaign moved on for so long, we're working with organizers from just a ton of different campaigns as we do like land and housing justice work. I'm sure a ton of us, even in this virtual room, are in campaigns related to Palestine, just a lot of different movements and causes that are related to housing and justice. And so the timing of everything was and just we ought to in this kind of transition phase from a tenant opportunity to community opportunity to purchase act just really invest in what base building can look like moving forward and just like reflecting on that. And then the TOPA working group also, even as we're moving to this new phase in COPA, we're still closely monitoring the rollout of a ton of local initiatives, including the vacancy tax. But there's still a lot of opportunities where we can ensure that we're uplifting affordable housing preservation. And so the vacancy tax provides an opportunity where we can still funnel money into preservation strategies. So we're going to be paying close attention to that. And then lastly, as for all of us in this room, the fight for housing as a human right continues. And so we're going to keep doing what we can to support tenant protections and community control of land and housing, and affordable housing preservation and housing justice. And that is all. I'll end there and open it up for questions, which I'm going to also open the floor to my colleague Michael to answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for giving us a bit of a deep dive into the Berkeley campaign and the Berkeley experience. And yes, now is the time for some question and answer. So we can take the slideshow down for a few minutes, and maybe that'll help us all to be able to see each other a little bit better. Um, and do we have some questions that folks would like to answer?
We have two from the chat that are in the questions document.
Okay, I wonder if we don't need to be spotlighting Jasmine exclusively anymore. That way we can see more of each other here in the Zoom room. Okay, so we have two questions, it seems like, to start with. What have we got as maybe a first question, Jeff?
The first one, which was answered in the chat, but maybe we'll post the link again, was will the slides be available afterwards? They will, and if somebody can post that link again in the chat, just so people have it.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, the slides will be available afterwards to all attendees here, and we're also going to post a recording online on our website, not for, everyone in the world, but just so folks can access this content if they weren't able to join us today. Thanks. And next question, Jeff.
Next question, there's actually two questions from Iris Corina. First is, how does Prop 5 apply to TOPA? And the second is, what type of nonprofit may qualify to be a purchaser under COPA?
All right. Maybe we'll start with the second question first, and that's a question related to qualified nonprofits. Michael or Jasmine, would you like to take that and talk about the qualified nonprofits under the Berkeley proposal, and then we'll see if Amanda has anything to share in terms of San Francisco. I think they're probably somewhat similar, but yeah, who would like to start?
Yeah, I can jump in first. So this is one aspect of the TOPA policy that I think would need to be built out further in regulations once it was implemented. But roughly speaking, qualified nonprofits just need to have some level of development expertise that shows that they can, really, from a real estate transaction standpoint, carry out the transaction successfully. And then I think there would also be additional criteria around being community-based and kind of having the right sort of mission-driven purpose for maintaining affordable housing. So that's, I think, all I can add on COPA definition.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Amanda, would you have any refinements from the San Francisco side?
Yeah. So from the San Francisco side, we have requirements that are laid out in our COPA legislation, similarly related to past experience. I mean, it's specific. It's like, I think it's the acquisition of 2 residential buildings within the last 5 years, evidence of relationships with neighborhood-based organizations. So yeah, the mission-driven piece and our tenant counseling programs. Also kind of wanting to understand the applicant's experience and capacity for acquisitions, but also continual management, so asset management of the building, and ensuring that they can find appropriate property management and have that kind of experience, or have the ability to find folks that they can partner with to provide some of that experience.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. And in relationship to the first question that Iris asked about how Prop 5 might relate to TOPA and COPA, Prop 5 on our ballots, the statewide Proposition 5, is a proposition that lowers the voter approval threshold for affordable housing bonds from the current 2/3 down to 55%, which is obviously still a super majority, but is the same percentage that school bonds have had to pass by for the past 20 years or so. So if Prop 5 were to pass, it would make passing affordable housing bonds easier. And that would provide funding for affordable housing development, as well as potentially some funding for preservation, especially if there needed to be renovations to a property, to bring it up to code or make or replace some things that might be old or not working well. So and for example, in the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, in the that had put forward a regional housing bond that we thought for a few weeks we were going to have a chance to vote on this November. There's a requirement under the law that created that agency that 15% of the funds would go toward preservation. So the passage of Prop 5, making it easier to pass bonds, would, we anticipate, also provide more money for housing preservation, which would help support TOPA and COPA acquisitions in the future. So they are directly related in terms of having funding available for future acquisitions. Additional questions? Oh, and I see a note here that it appears that, or not appears, that acquisition of buildings would also be bond eligible. So directly, any bonds that would be passed with Prop 5 could help with TOPA or COPA acquisitions. Do we have additional questions? I'm trying to look here in the chat. I know my colleague Jeff had as well.
We have a question from Meredith Rupp. Any idea from folks in the room what sets San Francisco apart when it comes to TOPA COPA? Why and how have they been successful in passing a policy when many other jurisdictions have not done so, at least not yet? There's one answer in the chat from Matt Gustafson with Bay Area CLT that says, in San Jose, the political culture and housing preservation ecosystem are vastly different. San Francisco has a lot of CDCs, community development corporations and community land trusts that are ready and able to utilize COPA. In San Jose, the electeds didn't even understand or believe in the concept of housing preservation. And I don't know if there are other answers to that question as well. What made San Francisco so successful in passing this?
Amanda, any reflections on your end about why San Francisco might be special?
So I was not around and working at the city when COPA was passed in 2019, but from what I've heard, I do think it's kind of the mix of there's political will, there was, the supervisors wanted to get something passed, and also I think it's a small bite of the apple. It was still very political, and the brokers community still had some pushback, but I think COPA, for various reasons, always seems a bit more palatable to folks than TOPA, or easier to digest for that. So, I think it's a combination of things, but that it's a COPA and there was some political will, I think, was part of it.
Thanks, Amanda. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in there about other jurisdictions in the Bay Area, but maybe there are some differences between TOPA and COPA, which might make one seem easier to do or more palatable than another for a variety of reasons. We have a few more minutes for questions. Do we have another question, Jeff?
Yeah, the next question we've got comes from Trisha, I'm sorry, from Emily M. Do you have referrals for homeowners in Oakland that the city has put a lien on their property since they couldn't prove they actually lived in the home? I think if someone worked with them, they would move since the home is not habitable.
That's a more Oakland specific issue. For folks here, Jeff, as one of our Oakland experts, do you have advice?
This is a little different from a COPA situation or a TOPA situation because this sounds like a homeowner who's gotten into distress on condition of their property. My first thing to do would be to refer them to Oakland's Housing Assistance Center to see what assistance the city has to help them rehab their home, bring it up to code and to be able to stay in it. I don't know if that fully answers the question. Emily, did you want to add something?
All right, Emily, if you have other questions or concerns, thanks for raising your question, and feel free to reach out to us on EBHO staff if you have other questions or think that there might be a way that we could direct you further. I think we might have time.
We have a couple more.
Yeah, okay. Let's keep moving here.
From Trisha Gonzalez, how many different QNPs were activated to acquire the 328 residential properties in San Francisco? Was it all Meta?
How many qualified nonprofits do you have under the COPA program, Amanda?
Yeah, we currently have 16, and four were responsible for that number of acquisitions. So there's a number that haven't acquired under COPA. And sorry, it was 328 units. It was 18 properties, so 18 acquisitions through 4 different sponsors. And yeah, Meta has the number of those.
Great. But not exclusively Meta. There were
Not
3.
exclusively.
Yeah. All right. And I think we have time for the last question, or one more question anyway.
This one from Matt Gustafson for Amanda. How often does a QNP express interest in making a purchase and then not actually make the purchase in the end? When that happens, is it normally before or after the offer gets made?
Yeah, so the legislation's written in an interesting way where most CD is typically not actually made aware of a COPA property unless we're somehow involved with the financing until the end when the seller is required to submit the seller declaration attesting that they're in compliance with COPA when they sold the property. So, um, you know, we don't have numbers on how many QNPs expressed interest in a property and then, decided not to pursue it any further. We do know that, it is sometimes QNPs will express interest in a property that looks like it could be promising. And once they receive their additional disclosures, determine for a variety of reasons it might not be the right fit. And then we do have folks that do make it offer. That, like I said, we're only kind of aware of it when it includes a financing ask from the city, and that doesn't happen too often. But it could happen more frequently, when a nonprofit just decides to express the interest to kind of retain their rights as they go through the due diligence process. So sorry, I don't have any kind of hard numbers, but.
Quick follow-up to that. First of all, it sounds like for people working on these ordinances, putting in some kind of city notification might be useful just so the city can track. But my question is, how do sellers know what the list of qualified nonprofits is, and how do they know about the requirements of the law?
Yeah, so it's all on our website. You know, the San Francisco Association of Realtors outreaches to their members. We're open to kind of receive any questions that brokers may have. Um, and so everything's on our website, and we hope to be a good resource to folks, and we can kind of support them through that process as well.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. And we are coming up to the end of our hour, so that is the end of our question time. I have just a couple invitations or reminders for folks as we close out, and a couple more slides. So Braseda, if you could bring those back up, that would be great. Thank you so much. First, I want to encourage folks to, if you've enjoyed or you've learned information here this afternoon, keep up with us at EBHO. You can sign up for updates. You can join us on Facebook, and Lavender's put all of these links in our chat. Thank you. We're also on Instagram and what's now known as X, formerly Twitter. And just a plug to RSVP for our Lunch and Learn in November, which will be around homelessness and what the needs are, and also what we know are the solutions to homelessness that we can implement if we have the political will and the public will to do so. Our lunch and learn series has been on the fourth Thursday of every month at 1 o'clock. Obviously, in November, the fourth Thursday is a day when a lot of us will be talking turkey. So we've moved our lunch and learn for November to the third Thursday, so it'll be November 21st at 1. But we hope that you can join us also then. And I want to just thank everybody for being with us this afternoon, and wish you a great rest of your day. And if there's anything any of us at EBHO can do, or other questions we can answer, please feel free to reach out. I want to thank and appreciate our guest presenters as well. Amanda Fukutome-Lopez from the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Housing, and Jasmine Sozi from East Bay Community Law Center and Bay Area Community Land Trust. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.